my job is to not just give you fish every day. I'm going to teach you how to fish because I want you to be able to live and interact and survive well beyond our sport. So for me, it's such a relational thing, Tyler, versus a transactional thing. You know, we don't tout. You won't go on our website and see we have the largest database. Well, who in the heck wants that?
Welcome to the Foul Pole to Foul Pole podcast, brought to you by Black Diamond Softball and Fitness, presented by the Till Valhalla Project, where heroes live on forever.
So when you talk to these families and different ball players, whatever stage they're at, how hard is that for you to get that across to them? Like, hey, your story is not going to be the same as someone else's.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big part of the conversation, talking about your journey is your journey. I mean, even Tyler, think of the kids who've had a parent that has played before, that went to college and played. That recruiting process is no longer existing. Like, dude, I sent VHSs out. Like, these kids have no idea what a VHS is. And then remember, you had to ask them you had to ask them to return it back to you because you didn't have that many, right? Like, that process no longer exists. It's so different. And it's different across sports. You know, I have siblings and one's a swimmer and one's a softball player. That's completely different. The rules are different. Right. People don't realize D1 rules in softball are different than D3 recruiting rules in softball. And the same thing goes for baseball. D1 is different than D1 softball. So everybody, you know, you call it path, I call it journey or process. It is unique as you are. Yeah. Right. For one kid, it might take 3 emails. For another kid, it's going to take 53 emails. It depends. I mean, there's a lot into this process. And the thing at the end of the day that I want my kids and families to, you know, leave with after talking with me is wherever you decide to go and whatever that looks like never determines your worth as a person or a player. Right. So, yes, I have a lot of kids who can play D1 ball, but they've chosen to go a D3 or an NAI route or a JUCO route because that's their journey. It's not about me. Right. And it's not about mom and dad anymore. This has to be about what is best for Ava, right? What does your journey look like? Maybe you have a different level like of play. Maybe you don't have the right test scores and grades to attack that school. Maybe that school doesn't need your position. So you've got to be ready to, you know, just because your teammates are getting recruited by that school or that school comes up to your game this week, and that doesn't mean that they're recruiting you. Or you don't have to. I think a lot of girls get wrapped up in that we have a trouble giving other females their props and clapping for other people's success because we're worried about our own. And I try to, you know, let these kids understand that your time is coming. Your process is so different, and the timeline and the race that you're about to run is so different than anybody else, but clap for that girl. Mm-hmm. Right? There's no reason to put anybody else's shine out just because you haven't seen yours yet. Yeah. So I think, you know, it's something I mean, if you watch me on social media, I talk about it. It starts with the conversation with these families because we don't just take anybody on. So it's part of my decision if I'm going to take a family on after having these talks with the family and with the player. So it's something that they hear over and over, and they're going to continue to hear it all the way through with me. So I think it's maybe difficult at first, but when somebody like myself comes in and has those opinions for that kid, yeah, even though mom and dad maybe have been saying it for years, somebody else recognizes it and says it, and it kind of, I think they realize it once their journey is done, they look back and go, oh, that, you know, that's what you meant. So, right. Yeah, you're right. You're spot on. Everybody's process is unique, and it's going to take its own ebbs and flows.
Yeah. And to be honest, like the people we're trying to impress, or the families or the players are trying to impress, are all human too. So we don't know what mood they're going to be in when they see a clip or they get an email or they get a phone call or they get a text. So you may catch them in the perfect scenario, and it's only the first, second, or third email or correspondence that you've had with them. Or, you know, they could just not be available for a couple of weeks, and you've sent them 12 emails and you've made a couple of different phone calls, and then finally, boom, it hits, and then now you've cracked that shell. There's been some talks. They've invited you to a camp, or they, say, hey, give me your schedule for the next month. I'm going to try to make it to one of them. Everybody's process is different.
Right.
I know you've been around the game for quite a long time. And when we talk about the development in players, we also want to talk about the development in recruiting strategy, exposure, and marketing as a whole within the game of softball. So when NSR got started, now about 41 years ago, something like that?
43, the year I was born, 1980.
So
NSR and I are the same age, so 43 years.
Talk a little bit about the history of NSR and why it's still out there and being utilized by more and more athletes, and what good it has done over the years to help these athletes, ultimately reach their goals.
Yeah, such a loaded question. So I'll try to break it down into basically 3 nuggets there. But
Sure.
so yeah, since 1980, it's the oldest and longest running recruiting service, for lack of a better word, that started in the garage of our CEO. His father started this company. So it's family owned. If you call headquarters, you're going to get the owner's wife or the owner's sister. So it starts at the top. Yeah, it starts at the top there. And so what they did, it was for Rusty Rigney is our owner. His brother was a football kid, and his dad was trying to figure out how can we get his information out there. And they started I believe the story is they started basically a printing press in the garage and printed. It used to be NSR used to be, all paper form, VHS mailings, that sort. I mean, it started from that grassroots of a level. So it started with football. Now volleyball and softball become a really big piece of the company, but we do all NCAA sports.
Mm-hmm.
We do NAIA sports. We have flag football females.
Wow.
We have rodeo. We have dancers. We have esports, and our big one right now is bass fishing. Crazy, I know.
That's
So
crazy.
it goes across the board. And here, Tyler, I take care of other PSAs outside of softball. So I have wrestlers, I have swimmers. Dude, I don't wrestle and I don't swim. I don't need to know your sport in order to teach you how to get recruited.
Mm-hmm.
Recruiting's a whole other side of this. Yes, I want my kids to be great at their sport and take care of their academics, but getting yourself recruited is sold separately. It's not reactive. You're not just going to happen to find you. Now, NSR has evolved, and we're more, in tune with what's going on and in times and technology and things. But at the end of the day, it's still our kids who have to drink the water. I can lead you to it, and I can give you leads all day long and teach you soft skills. But at the end of the day, these coaches want to hear from you. And so my job is to not just give you fish every day. I'm going to teach you how to fish because I want you to be able to live and interact and survive well beyond our sport. So for me, it's such a relational thing, Tyler, versus a transactional thing.
Mm-hmm.
We don't tout. You won't go on our website and see we have the largest database. Well, who in the heck wants that? Like, I want quality. I don't want this quantity of players. I want quality. And for me, my reputation. I've got these coaches are my peers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like if I send Jen Patrick Swift something at NC State, she knows me. Like she's going to expect a certain level.
Right.
And I'm not going to put my kids and my families, I'm not going to bring them on board if they're not ready to meet that kind of, standard threshold. So we're not a company, Tyler, that's just going to let anybody come on board.
Yeah.
You can't just go sign up with us. I'm going to select who I want to work with. That's the difference that all the other ones out there, you've got, online recruiting services, you've got video housing sites, but that's open. Anybody can have it. And to me, if anybody can have it, why do you want it? Like what, you know what I mean?
That's a very good point. Wow.
And the other thing you have to think about, guys, is you got to remember, I'm a former college coach. I have seen everything that has been out there. Name them, I've seen it and heard of it. Mom pop shots, I've heard of them. I work for NSR for a reason because I understood, back when Robbie Wilson was still alive, he was the scout that I had the connection with, and I recruited his kids because they always had they were good people, good students, and then they could play ball. And I knew he wasn't going to give me anything I wasn't really looking for. I don't, oversell the kids. I'm not going to blow smoke at you. So I knew going from coaching world and then going into the scouting side, I knew if I was going to do this, who I would want it to be with. And so here we are 6 years later.
I look at NSR as a VIP network, and I know that may sound weird to some, but I'm going to explain my thought process on it, and maybe other people understand it too. When I think of NSR, and what you guys do across the board, all NCAA the athletes that either have went through the process, went at it alone, or went through a service to kind of help them along. Like you had mentioned, you don't take on everybody, because if you did, it would just muddy the waters, and then this network of coaches that you have relationships with wouldn't look at you the same. They'd look at it as, well, she's just pumping numbers. So you have these relationships with these coaches, and it makes you a part of their circle. They kind of get used to the quality of athlete, the quality of person that you're going to send them, and you almost, lack of a better word, you vouch for that athlete and that family, so that these people, that vetting process that they have to go through with a ton of recruits that potentially get there, you've kind of started that process for them. If they didn't trust you to do this, you wouldn't have these relationships. So I want to ask you this question about network. How important is it, not only to a coach, but to an athlete and the family, to start building a network as soon as you can, no matter if you intend on going to that school or playing for that travel ball coach? How important is a network to a potential recruit?
Oh, I think it's the foundation. I mean, if you don't have that relationship and that credibility with the college coaches, it's really hard to then, put those kids in front of those coaches and end up there. I still network. There's still coaches I don't know. And for me, I'm working in other sports that I may not know. Working with female wrestling coaches has been so fun.
Yeah.
They're so open to it. So I think you build your network every day. I don't think I know everybody in the softball world. I don't claim to know everybody in the, softball recruiting. Like, I'm learning things every day, but I think networking, skin in the game, actually knowing people is what sets it apart. A kid in a family can try to reach out to a coach, but if that coach doesn't see the credibility, who is this kid? Like, you're one of thousands emailing me just today. What sets you apart? Well, if somebody like myself puts my name on that kid, that right there opens that door. Whether it's myself, whether it's your travel manager, your high school manager, any of these people could be that network. But at the end of the day, it still has to be you. You still have to use your voice in this process.
Right.
But networking is everything, because otherwise, I think, Tyler, what you're doing is you're being reactive and you're waiting for things to happen to you or for them to find you. You know what I mean? So networking is proactive, and I'm all about being proactive in this process, putting yourself, making things happen instead of waiting for them to kind of come to you or waiting for something to just fall in your lap. I think a lot of people think it's a reactive process.
Yeah, I agree. I want to backtrack to COVID and what that kind of did with social media. I want to ask you a question of how important is social media in today's world of recruiting, and the impact that COVID had on Twitter.
Yeah, COVID did a lot of things. It definitely changed the game of recruiting for a minute, and I think some things have stayed and some things have gone away. And I mean, the truth is, I think social media is always going to now be a piece of the puzzle. But the puzzle's not complete without multiple pieces. It's not going to just take, it's a tool. And Tyler, let's say a kid needs to have a hammer and instead they keep grabbing the screwdriver. Yeah, you have a tool, but you got to know how to use it. And I think there's a lot of bad uses of Twitter. There's definitely an etiquette that has gone by the wayside in our sport. It started with football and basketball. Men's sports have absolutely just changed the way softball works. And I don't think softball necessarily at the time those coaches were ready for it, because you got to mix. You got old school coaches, and then you have the younger coaches who are all about social media.
Yeah.
you can get an answer quicker in DMs from the younger coaches than you can if you email them, which,
Wow.
they've got to learn though. They've got to learn that email's still, I think, going to be how most people interact with them, whether it's
Mhm.
travel managers and high school coaches, and the kids and families are still going to email them. Not everybody is going to have social media to DM you. So I think the younger coaches need to tap back into the old ways a little bit. And also then the older coaches need to tap into the social media side.
Yeah.
If you're on Facebook, those coaches are typically not going to want to be friends because they use Facebook more as a personal on a personal level, whereas Twitter might be their professional side, but they're just not as good at it yet. The content isn't up to par. But I think COVID sped that up. Definitely. I mean, yeah, kids were able to put video out there, but if you're tagging the wrong coaches and you're just unrealistic, you're fishing in the wrong pond. And,
Yeah.
and everybody gets a kick out of it, but your Walmart Snoopy pool is not going to deep sea fish. It's not going to help you at all when you go deep sea fishing.
Right.
You can throw as many lines as you want, but you don't have the right tackle, you don't have the right bait, you're not even in the right vessel.
Right.
That Walmart Snoopy pool will catch you some fish, I promise, but it ain't going to be in that pond. And
Right.
too many kids get caught up in a pond, or they see other kids who are they just follow suit thinking, well, that's what she's doing, so that must be what I need to do.
Yeah.
Remember, not those kids um, aren't getting. I would think that they're not getting the best advice in that manner. I think it's okay to tag coaches, but it's got to be when you're at their camp or their visit. But
Right.
just tagging a bunch of coaches is not the. That's again, it's reactive.
Yeah.
You just post video to YouTube or Twitter and expect a coach just to, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
they don't even know who you are. They don't know where you're from. They don't know what position you play.
Yeah.
So I think, it's helped, but it's also maybe set us back a little bit
Hmm.
because it's a lot more reactive now than it was as being proactive.
Yeah. I, and I think too, I've talked to quite a few coaches on different levels. And one thing that they all have in common is if the more video you send me, the more chances I have to look at something and find something that's going to get me to mark you off my list, because there's a list of players and I've got thousands. I'm trying to take my list from thousands down to hundreds, down into the tens and twenties here. So if I can find something to mark you off before I ever get into it with you, then that's what I'm looking for. And I find that interesting because there's so many players that put their pitching workouts in, or their pitching instruction workouts, and their hitting and their cage work and their fielding and their this and their that. Man, the coach is just looking for anything to. So why not
That-
leave that
That's an
for
interesting.
them?
That's definitely an interesting take. I never thought about it like that. There is such a thing as too much.
Yeah, exactly.
And
It's
or again,
what it
not
is.
everything needs to be out there. I think you've got to vet the video. It's not
Mhm.
always just because it's video doesn't mean it's good video.
Mhm.
But on the other side of things, you never know what a coach is going to see. I mean, I remember specifically one of my kids, I had her for, months, whatever, and we'd post videos of her hitting. And at the time, this is during COVID. So she's upstairs in her loft. They had space to do ladder and footwork and plyometrics. And I made one post and I had three coaches call me on just her athleticism.
Mhm.
And you would not think that something like that video would have gotten that response. So at the same time, maybe there is too much. I think sometimes kids don't utilize maybe enough. I
Mhm.
mean, I think, there could be a fine line between too much and not enough.
There's there's it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. You don't know which way your path is going to go. I mean, they could just catch something in passing, happen to be scrolling through TikTok and see something, or see a reel or something like that, and they go, okay, wait a minute, and then they go to try to find more clips or more videos or something of you, and it's not there, and they're like, oh man. So I mean, everybody's situation is different, but when it comes down to it, our our youth needs to learn how to brand and market themselves the right way. And there's a lot of times that kids will post something or do something or say something or act a certain way where automatically they're just off of one college's list while they're still on other colleges' list. So talk to me a little bit about what you go through when you're talking about marketing with the athletes and with the parents and sort of the do's and don'ts of what we need to see more of, and we better not see this stuff anymore.
Yeah, I mean, I think branding is pretty much everything. I mean, these
Mhm.
days it can be it's out so much in the forefront versus the old days of recruiting. We talk a lot about marketing yourself, but I think that that's part of my job in covering my kids is giving them that credible exposure. They
Mhm.
don't have a lot of my kids don't want to be the mouthpiece. A lot of my parents don't want to be the person to be bragging on their kids. So I
Mhm.
get to do that
Right.
in an advocate sort of way. And so they kind of follow my lead. They see that you will never see me make a post about being offered. I don't make posts about being offered. I think that I want my families to move like the G in lasagna. We move in silence. Like it doesn't need to be said when you're offered. As a college coach, I would not have liked to have that kid post about my offer. Now, if they want to tell other coaches in one-on-one meetings that, hey, I got an offer from Coach B at, XYZ, that's fine.
Mhm.
But to put it out on social media, you just won't see me do it. So my families, they take the lead. They see and most of these families have been watching me for years. So they see the consistency in what I put out there and how I put it out there. And I don't, I'm not tagging coaches. You're not going to see that happen unless it's at their camp or at
Mhm.
their visit. Um, Man, we could spend hours on do's and don'ts of social media because then you're going to get into, the parents.
Yeah.
My goodness, just because we can say
Right.
something on social media doesn't mean we should. You will never see me post about controversial things one way or the other.
Mhm.
I'm going to offend somebody, so I'd rather not offend anybody. But if you know me personally, then you know my feelings and I don't need to put it out there. But these parents just have that itch to just say things that are just inappropriate or will absolutely 100% get your kids crossed off that list. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's a lot of do's and don'ts, and I'm not going to say everybody agrees with me. There's a lot of coaches who want to be tagged.
Mhm.
Well, okay, fine. If that coach says it's okay to tag them, then tag them.
Right.
But there's a lot more that aren't, and I would just rather you not offend anybody than offend somebody because inevitably you're going to leave somebody out. You're somebody that thinks of you as their number one, yet you're tagging everybody but them. What does that look like? I
Yeah.
mean, that doesn't look good.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see it as much anymore. At least I haven't heard about it in a pretty good while. But there have been those instances where you'll get a player that tags two crosstown rival schools in the same thing. It's like, okay, well, which one are you looking at here? Which one are you interested in? It's like you're tagging North Carolina and Duke, or you're tagging Clemson and South Carolina or whatever. It's like, oh man, somebody needs to tell her not to do that. But it happens.
It
I don't know.
and I think the same should go for, these travel managers. You guys are a representation of your organization and your teams and families. And again, just because you can say things doesn't mean you should. I think that there's just a lot of filtering that needs to happen and ask yourself, is this truthful? Is it helpful? Before I go posting about it, because if I start making comments about the new NCAA legislation, it just doesn't look good because some coach is going to see you complaining about that or complaining about your high school coach and that situation. And what do you think that's what I'm going to get if
Yeah.
I recruit your player or, any of your players or any of your parents is that's what you're posting about? I think that there needs to just be some common sense, man. Like keep it simple, silly. The kid. I mean, come on, it's the
Yeah.
KISS theory. Just keep
It's
it simple.
it
Let's
goes
not
back
overthink
to
this.
being able to admit to yourself that you don't know everything and you have got to lean on people that have made this their expertise and trust them and listen to them. Go with it for a little bit and then gain your own experience. If it doesn't work for you, then you take that and you throw it away and then you look for something else. But at least give someone, if you know nothing about a subject, give someone the benefit of the doubt that you can sort of vet and then run with it for a little bit. It's not going to hurt you. You're going to learn from it. You're going to see what you like and what you don't like and what you can change and what you would change. And you move on and go to the next. That's how you build networks. So, you being a conduit, I know you work with different high school coaches, travel ball coaches. and up into the college ranks. How hard is it for you to be able to navigate that process with those travel coaches and be able to let them down and say, hey, you know what? This athlete, I know this is her dream school, but she's not a good fit. She's not going to work out there. It's not they're not looking for any more 2023 second baseman or middle infielders or whatever. There's not a spot for her here. But let's look at these schools. These, how do you go about that process with them?
Well, I absolutely love when travel coaches see myself as like a compliment and a supplement to what they bring, and hopefully they value my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of egos out there, and there's a lot of travel coaches that think they can do what I do. And at the end of the day, Tyler, I work for the family.
Mm-hmm.
So 99% of my conversations are going to be with the kid and the player. And I'm just brutally honest. I would much rather you hate me for telling you the truth than loving me because I'm lying to you.
Right.
And think about it from my side. My job, I have to place you. At the end of the day, I have a 97% placement rate. If I take you on, I'm going to place you.
Right.
So I've got to, I'm not going to just like force you into something if I know it's not the right pond for you to be in. I have to be able to tell you that. That's what you need to hear. It's not what you want to hear, but it's what you need to hear. And I think too many people tell kids and families what they want to hear.
Yeah.
And so it just leads to this, it just leads to a slow process. Kids are disengaged. They become really like salty in the process, and they don't realize, kiddo, you just need to humble yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That level, listen, we're talking about going to any level of school. 7% of players at any level, at any sport, 7% of high school kids are going to go play college. That's not a lot.
No.
7% is if you're one of the 7%, that is a privilege. That is an honor. That's not a right that they have. So 7% at any level should be the goal. But we have kids that, the D1itis and D1 only, or travel organizations that will only tell, here's all my D1 kids. Well, I don't think that's really healthy, because you're going to have a D1 player that decides that's not, I can play at that level, but I'd rather go to Virginia Wesleyan and win a D3 championship, right? Or I'd rather go to Christopher Newport and win a D3 championship. They have D1 players on their team.
Yeah.
Okay. But that doesn't mean that they are less than. And so, I'm always perturbed when I see people talking about, well, we have this many D1. Why don't you just talk about the overall number? Because at the end of the day, it's not up to me. I don't set that pond, right? Like, softball is not a metric sport. It's not golf or swimming or track where your score or your time places you at this level. Softball is so subjective.
It is.
But at the end of the day, it's for the kid to decide what is right, what is best for me.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? What does my journey look like? Not the travel manager, not me, not mom and dad.
I had a chance to talk with Hannah Goodwin like a week or so ago. Had her on the podcast, and we were talking, and I think before we got going, or after we stopped recording, I'd asked her the question about the separation between D1 ball players and D2 and D3, and she said there is no separation as far as what's on the field. She said, now, of course, you're going to have the superstar studs. She said, but you have those at D2, you have those at D3. It depends on what's going on outside of the game that makes them go D1 or makes them go D2 or D3. It's not the athletic ability. It's not that type of sport. Just like you were saying, there's not a measurement like a long jump. If you hit this number, then these are D1 numbers. These are D2 numbers. And it is this thing that we have going on now. And I guess it's a parents and it's a coaches thing about this D1 bust or D1 or bust mentality. And I can't stand it. And I actually had a conversation with my 7th grader this morning. She told me, we're riding down the road in the truck first thing this morning, and we were talking about this upcoming season. And then we started talking a little bit about, I don't know how we got on a conversation about college, but out of the blue, this youngin goes, if I don't go D1, I feel like I'm going to let folks down. And I had to stop her right away. And I said, you go play ball wherever you want to go play ball at if you can make it. I just want you to be in a better situation than your mother and I were. And it's crazy that a 7th grader, who she knows I'm involved with a lot of different things, but that she thinks that her mind, she's going to let somebody down if she doesn't go play D1 ball. So that's a conversation I'm going to have to continue to have down the road with her. And it's going to have to that conversation is going to have to evolve. But I know I don't have the only seventh grader that has that same feeling.
Yeah, I mean, and it's sad. I mean, I want to hug her because again, her worth is not determined on whatever,
Isn't that
D
crazy?
whatever. Those degrees behind me don't say that I played NAI softball and it didn't keep me from a D1 assistant job and a D2 head coaching career. It's about the degree. It's about what that degree can do for you down the road. I mean, she's seventh grade, so it's what she's seeing. It's what, is she on social media?
Small, like not too much, really.
Not too much.
So I mean,
Um,
she knows girls. One of the girls that she looks up to in the area just signed to go play with, or just committed to go play with UNCW, and we were
okay.
talking about that. I think that may have been because she asked it if Dub was a D1 school, and so I think at that point she's like, okay, well, if I don't go D1, I'm going to let some folks down because she is good, but she's good in this area. Like she hasn't gotten out and played higher level and played too much, national level competition. So she hasn't had a taste of that. So when you're good in your little area and then people start putting this, oh man, she's going D1, she's going D1. Dude, she plays 12U or she plays 14.
It's
You have no
it's
idea.
such
Don't put
it's
that pressure on her.
don't put that pressure, and it's such a disservice because again, it's beyond. It's not just about softball, especially for females. Like we're not going to go play pro. You know what I mean? Like these next 4 years for those kids are everything, and so I want to make sure that they're making a smart decision off the academics first. Can you go there and play? Yeah, but you might not play till your junior year. Whereas if you go over here, you could be maybe an All-American for the first 2 years.
Yeah.
I definitely, recruiting at Chowan, I lost a lot of kids in that area to D3s or the D1s, but you got to find your fit. And I think at seventh grade, I think if you could maybe take her. Obviously, camps are a big part of the recruiting process, and make sure we're not just camping at all the D1 schools that are emailing you.
Yeah.
Take these kids to the local NAI and D3 because those are the coaches that can actually communicate directly with these kids right now, and it gets them that side of things. It gets kids comfortable with conversing and talking and building those soft skills, but it gives them something different to see. You know what I mean? So I think if you can expose them to all levels, and usually that starts through camp. Let's not just go to all the big camps that you can find. Let's find those NAIs and the D3s and the D2s in your local area before you start looking at the D1s.
Yeah. I think too, kind of going off of that a little bit, I think these young players have got to learn how to speak to coaches.
Yeah.
Like I mean, they're putting their heads down and they're just walking past them, and it's like,
Yeah.
"Hey, how are you?" And they like won't even answer a question. And my kids are like that too. And I'm like, "Wait a minute, your daddy's on posting videos and doing it." And I wasn't like that all the time either, but you kind of have to learn it. Like take a speech class in high school. Tell me. Explain to me what the biggest disconnect is when it comes to these kids and not being able to talk about themselves to a potential college coach.
Tyler, because they don't have to do it now for themselves.
Right.
Their moms and dads do literally everything. We used to have the helicopter parents who were just around, and then my later years of my career, it was lawnmower parents. They'll mow everything away, whether it's good or bad, just for this path. But it sets these kids up for failure in the long run.
Yeah.
Teaching a kid, and again, Tyler, that's why I meet with every player and every family before I offer to work with them. Is we have these Zoom calls. I'm going to make you uncomfortable because I need you to get comfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
you need to see me tell mom and dad to stay in their place when they start to try to answer for you. Right? This isn't for me. It's not just growing the kids, but I've got to get a hold of these parents sometimes too and tell them what they need to hear in this process. You do not answer for her. Look, Tyler, let them mumble and stumble and bumble their way through this. It's the only way they get experience and practice. And it's going to be awkward. So what?
Yeah.
Let it.
I,
Let these kids those soft skills of time management and conflict resolution. And when you get to camps, that is your one opportunity, whether you're a project D1, D2, that is your opportunity where you can literally talk to a coach
yeah.
about whatever really you want besides recruiting for some levels. But that's your opportunity to get in front of the D1 coach and have that engagement. but a lot of them, social media has done it. Parents have done it for
Yeah.
them, so they don't really necessarily know how. Tyler, they don't even have to call to order a pizza
Right.
anymore.
Yeah.
I mean,
Society has done a lot of different things to the recruiting element that and there's so many different elements in the recruiting process that you can't just bank on one and go, okay, I'm going to do this really well, because you could be the number one
whether
best athlete but can't speak in front of people, so they
there you
they
go.
don't know you, they don't have a personality on you, and
Yeah,
it's tough. That's
you you
another
you
part
you
of
can
it.
be you can be physically ready to play your sport at the next level. You can have the grades and you can have the character all you want, but if you don't have the motivation behind the scenes to do your emails and to proactively put yourself out there,
Mhm.
whether they answer or not, that's the difference. Is I can have all of that, but if a kid is not has very little time management or organizational skills or organizing the responsibilities, I don't usually take those kind of kids on because they're not going to be ready for me.
Right.
They're not going to be ready for the value that I'm going to bring, because it's always going to be me just pushing and asking and begging, and this isn't my journey. Like I've played my ball. I'm trying to get you to where you want to be, and if this is your goal, then you've got to be ready for the activity that happens behind the scenes. And these kids aren't, because they haven't had to be. They haven't been held responsible to be.
Yeah.
And what's the point if I'm going to get a participation trophy? Why in the heck would I want to work as hard anyways?
Yeah. That's a good point. I think we've oversimplified things to the point where when push comes to shove and they're adults and they're out of the house, we're setting up for a couple of years of failure, that they're going to have to deal with this failure at that age versus dealing with the failure at a younger age and being able to work through it. Because I think failure is such a huge part of success. Failure is my favorite word. If you're watching my podcast or go to any of my clinics or do any of the stuff that I do, man, I love talking about failure because I think it's powerful. And I think if we push off that big failure to where it's like, oh man, I've got to make a big time adjustment here. If we push that off to when they're in their 18, 19, 20 years old, man, we are doing them a disservice. And we have to, as parents, coaches, we gotta get away from that. So
Absolutely. I mean, I think, like you said, just get back to keeping it, we've simplified some things, I think maybe too much. And we put a lot of focus in the areas that really that's not maybe where we should be focused on, and just
mhm,
get back to building relationships with coaches, because that's what recruiting is. It's
mhm,
not going to be based off of an email I send them or a video they see on YouTube. It's going to be, how does this kid make me feel?
yeah,
How how is she building that relationship? Does she really want to play at this school? Or does she want to play for me? Because I might not be at the school, and I want my kids to make sure that they're making decisions off of what's best for them, and
right,
not maybe who the coach is, right? Like, I know you want to play for Pat Murphy, but is Pat Murphy going to be at Alabama forever? We don't know. Go to Alabama because it's a really dang good school with a great education,
yeah,
not because it's Pat Murphy coaching it.
yeah. I'm going to ask you about the transfer portal.
Yeah.
I'm sure I'm going to preface the question like this: your job, your passion is to get these students into the right situation. And the transfer portal is out there and it can be used the right way, but we also know it can be used the wrong way. The transfer portal has always been there. It's always been there in one capacity or the other.
Correct.
I think now football has kind of done it. So if football does it, everybody starts to pay attention to the transfer portal. So we start to make a big stink about it on the softball side of it. So now it's a popular topic. What are your thoughts on the transfer portal, and what does that do for you as a scout?
Well, obviously, it has impacted the high school athlete. To such a greater extent than it ever used to.
Mhm.
I mean, high school kids used to only have to compete against junior college kids, and now you're competing against not just junior college kids, but kids who have time in at a 4-year school,
Yeah.
who have college play underneath their belt. So now you've got you're competing against that now. I think the portal, like you said, is good for some scenarios, and it's not always good for some. So some kids who use it need it. Absolutely, it's there for a reason. But if you're not a pitcher, I would love to see the numbers on those kids that actually find another landing spot, because for me, it's always pitching. I've never been asked for anything outside of a transfer pitcher.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you're a dime a dozen middle infielder, outfielder, I would love to see the numbers on where those kids end up. You
Yeah.
know, the statistics, I would love to see how many kids who enter actually find something else. For me as a scout, I try to work my kids through this process so they never have to go into it. Again, going back to, I want you to make your decision on what this school is going to mean for you as a student, as an alum, what that degree is going to mean for you. And so for me, I want my kids making a decision on a school that isn't just 4 years, but it's a 40-year decision. And so that they're happy with where they're at. And that's why I want them starting early so they can get through a lot of that mud and really figure out what is my fit, because I don't want you to have to transfer.
Yeah.
If my kids do transfer, if they do put themselves in the portal, we help them. So I stay with them. We also stay with our kids through junior college. So it's not just like, we get you and then we leave you.
Yeah.
So
You
and
made
I've
it
had
so
very
long.
few, yeah, I've had very few portal kids. And I want to say like five, honestly, five, and we're all pitchers.
Yeah.
So I haven't had experience with like a middle infielder or an outfielder, but it definitely is part of the conversation these days. And
It has to be.
I think here's something, Tyler, not many people think about. My coach is now at a D1 school. He coached me at Tiffin when we were NAI, but he's a D1 coach now. And he said that he's really, really hesitant to put his freshman and sophomore up for conference awards because he's afraid of them being poached.
Wow.
And it happened early on that this kid was the conference player, freshman, conference player of the year, and she was poached. So I think you've opened up kind of Pandora's box there, where coaches are hesitant about wanting to like really kind of give these kids their honors and their dues, because you've got coaches coming behind trying to swoop them up, So that's something that I don't think is really talked about a whole lot, or conversations are being had about it, but it's definitely affecting that side of things. But yeah, I try not to talk about it too much with our kids, but they know it's part of the process, that it's
Right.
there. But I want you to make that decision so you don't have to worry about being in the portal.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, that's got to be scary because you're going right back through that process again of like, where am I going to land? And I think the last I checked, there's still something like 800 athletes, some crazy number like that right now, that
so
sitting in the portal.
yeah,
I mean, that's scary, and I think athletes need to be aware of it. But it's also like, hey, we want to make sure you avoid anything that may cause this transfer portal. There's stuff outside of your control, 100%. But don't use it as, oh, I'm not getting as much playing time as I thought I was, I'm going to go transfer somewhere else. No, you need to get in the weight room or get on the field, bust your butt, something like that. But if there's if there's something like that going on, that's why it's there. And it is what it is. I wanted to ask you about the numbers before the transfer portal. It seemed to fill up. It used to be like the recruiting classes would be about 5 or 6 athletes, I would say, somewhere around there. And then now we're talking about bringing in maybe 2 or 3, 4 high school athletes, freshmen in, because of the transfer portal. I mean, that's just me, an outsider, kind of looking in on it. I mean, is that where we're at now because of their being able to get already established college athletes?
Yeah, I think that's why the numbers are low for sure, is that they've already could find an established athlete. And, I would hate being a coach in these days. You used to recruit on a 2-year cycle. And now it's like, you couldn't pay me enough to want to try to roster management this stuff, because you have no idea who's leaving, when, and why. And you're trying to build, it's changed. It has completely changed the temperature for coaches and how they go about managing their rosters now. So I don't envy them in any type of way, because kids can just, like I said, they can leave for whatever reason. And then you've got, new kids coming in fall who you've got to try to figure out with your rookies. And there's a whole lot on these coaches' plates these days that wasn't ever there. And I just feel like the stress of it has got to be at an all-time high.
It used to be like fall ball was like kind of bring everybody in, kind of get everybody working on the same sheet of music here. We're looking, to see what we've got, this and that, heading into the spring. Now it's put up or shut up time when you get to fall. There ain't, I mean, it's a steep, I mean, it's, you're hitting and it
Well,
goes
now
just
you
like a roller
know.
coaster.
Well, now you kind of are getting into. You understand why some coaches want to get away from, recruiting in the fall. We,
Yep.
we want to lessen that D1. The D1s want to lessen the amount of time they're out. Well, heck, we've got 3 new portal kids coming in with 1 or 2 freshmen, and I'm trying to figure this out
Yeah.
in 2 months, and then I got to get on the road and recruit a whole new set of kids. I haven't even had time.
Right.
So I think you're getting into a little bit of why you're seeing some of that pushback on the amount of days in the fall. I mean, fall recruiting has become just something it never used to be. Like
Yeah.
I understand, and it's life work balance, which I know every job has. But if you try to get into this with me, just tell me you've never been a college coach without telling me you've never been a college coach by telling me every job has work life balance. Yeah, well, name me a job where you're on pretty much 24/7 for your kids and
Yeah.
community service projects and fundraising. I mean, there's a lot that goes on. It's not just coaching softball at the next level. There's a whole lot in that basket. And now pulling away from a little bit less of recruiting in the fall, I think is a good thing for coaches.
I think so too. I see both sides of it for not necessarily like D1 needing to be out in the fall time, but we're talking D2s, D3s, and NAI, JUCO and stuff like that that still uses that time to heavily recruit. So there needs to be something done. I don't have the answer. I'm not smart enough. I don't get paid enough to think about that stuff. But I'm at the point now where I can see where they want to be on campus with their kids that they've recruited and they brought in, they've transferred in. The rookies that are coming in, they've got to figure out where they're placing all 22, all 21, all 24, however many they got on the roster. And we got to put something together this year because that window that coach has to succeed now is a lot smaller than it used to be. I mean, it's the business side of sports. And then what happens, it's the parents of a 13, 14, 15-year-old kid that's being affected by something that's already taken place a couple years ahead. And I don't think enough people realize that.
Right. Good point.
So with NSR, go into sort of the process without going into the whole process. Kind of what can parents expect? What can athletes expect when they get in contact and they fill out the questionnaire? For the ones that don't really know how to go about doing this process
Sure.
with you
So
guys.
you're not going to ever really get a mass email from us. That's not our company. So NSRs, you're going to see us on the ground, and we are at events, we're at showcases and tournaments. We are physically there. Okay. So if you ever are reached out to by one of us, know that we've seen you. Or I have kids who have sent me direct video. If we reach out to you, that's a good sign initially. And then from there, Tyler, it's having that conversation with the family and the player. Just for me, again, I know that you can play. Now I just want to find out more about, are you ready for this process? How are you communicating with me on this call? And basically it's an interview. That's what it is. It's an interview for the parents and the kids. And we just talk about what that recruiting process is, ask her about her goals, make sure that when we get into this, that they understand that my job is to get you recruited, but I'm not here to offer you a scholarship. That's not my job. My job is to make sure that I'm putting you out in front of all the ponds and the fishes that are wanting to bite. And then help them through that recruiting process at their own race. And that's a race at their own pace, meeting each family and kid where they're at. I mean, a lot of these kids, they just need help writing emails. I swear to you, it's so archaic. They just don't do it the way that needs to be done. And so it's so easy to go, well, just have kids send emails and go to camps. That's how you get recruited. Yeah. Have you ever seen these kids write lately? They don't know even, Tyler, they don't even know how email works. Have you ever gotten an email in the subject line? Yeah, I get those all the time.
It's the
Right?
punctuation and the capitalization for me. I can't I can't do it.
It's not a text, right? They want to text, they want to write an email like it's a text, or there's no signature. And I get an email that says, hey, coach, we play this week and hope we win. It's like, who are you? What tournament are you talking about? Right? Like, so it's giving these kids just the basics. Just again,
Right.
I'm not going to do it for you. It's teaching them to fish for themselves, because I'm not going to be here every time to give you a fish. Right? Or kids are like, well, what's Coach Smith's email at XYZ? for as much as these kids have access to immediate information, they are so stunted with how to find it.
Yeah.
Kid, go Google it.
Wow.
Google is your best friend. It's really simple. And 9 out of 10 coaches are going to have their emails on the website.
Yeah.
So they have so much information. They're inundated with so much, but they're so stunted with how to use it. I think that's the other piece to this recruiting is we didn't have access to this kind of stuff when I was going through the process, right? These kids have everything at their fingertips. And I think a lot of them, they want immediate gratification. They think it is going to happen now. I'm going to play this weekend in a showcase and coaches are going to find me and they're going to offer me. Or, I see kids posting on Twitter and YouTube. They think that just posting away, coaches are just going to happen to find them. They want immediate and they're not ready for that. No, they're not prepared. They've never been told no. They've never really had to figure it out. And I think that's what the recruiting, I think it humbles them, and trying to get them to understand it. This is a race that happens at your own pace, kiddo.
Yeah.
It can happen in late senior year. It could happen in early sophomore year. As long as you run that race in the order that it's supposed to be ran, right? And that you're running in the right lane.
Yeah.
That all matters. Fishing in the right ponds, that's what it starts with, knowing who to target and how to target and what to say, and then using all the tools that you have. So for me, it's, again, I'm going to talk to my families about meeting them where they're at, helping them kind of hold their hand, push them along, and more be like a map or a GPS, because I'm not driving the car. She is. Right? Mom and dad, you cannot drive this car. You cannot write their emails. You cannot do this for them. She's got to drive this car. So I'm going to sit next to you, kiddo. I'm going to be your map. And I'm going to be that GPS that tells you to, hey, let's slow down, back it up. Hey, let's take this exit. Right? And so that's where I'm going to give you the honest feedback. I'm not here to make you chase a bunch of camp emails. I'm going to make sure that the camps you go to are recruitable options.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we're not just going to go to every camp email you get. That's not an indication of recruitment. I mean, hell, I get camp emails. I get invited weekly to camps. So if that tells you anything, right? So,
you put your name on a list.
It's a process, and if one of us reaches out to you, you have done something already in that next step for us. I'm not going to just, hey, everybody come sign up with me. There's got to be things that you initially do to kind of spark my interest.
Yeah.
And then from there, it's literally hands-on. My families know that I am on call 24/7, and I am here for every dumb question they think they have. I'm here for their credibility. I'm here for their exposure, but it's not just get her an online website and you guys never hear from me again. So, I mean, it's relational. Versus a lot of, I think, things out there are very transactional, and it's not in the best interest of the kid. And that's, for me, at the end of the day, who I'm in this for, is for them.
Yeah. Back many moons ago when I was in the Marine Corps, I had a buddy. His favorite thing was to always say the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I try to relate that to my athletes that I work with on a daily basis is, man, if you don't know, ask. You've got to be involved with it. And there's not a dumb question. Like, you may think it's dumb, or because you should know this, or you've been told this before. Ask the question again. You may have to ask the same question 5 times before it finally registers in your brain housing and it finally clicks for you. But once it clicks, you're like, oh, okay, I got it now.
Sure. And also, I mean, I think I like to reiterate to kids and families that hard work is always going to beat talent when talent doesn't work hard. I know that's such an old cliche, but it's so true. I have had kids who are less talented get recruited to some schools who I thought would take this kid, but this kid doesn't respond, doesn't interact, won't do what I need them to do. So they miss the opportunity, all because they just didn't do the work. I mean, you're good at softball, but that's just part of it.
Yeah, it's a big part of it, but man, there is so much left out there that the kids and parents just don't realize that how in depth that whole recruiting process is. And to me, I always tell them it's never too soon to start, and you may just start it looking at colleges and their geographical locations. That if that's where you start at, okay, boom, at least now I know when I talk about Utah, I know where it's at on the map. Or if I want to go play in snowy Maine someday, at least I know where it's at on the map. And
Yeah,
I'm
that's
not
a
some
good point.
Florida kid going to Seattle to go
Yeah.
play.
I think that's a good point for the young ones. I think just kind of maybe get an idea of where, because you can't necessarily ask those young kids what you want to major in.
Exactly.
They don't even know what they want for breakfast tomorrow. So to ask them about majors is
Mhm.
silly. But if they have multiple ideas, okay, let's find the geographic area, but also let's look at schools that have that major,
Yeah.
because that's what you're there to do.
Yeah. And if, if they're looking at, hey, maybe I want to go to somewhere like Arizona, I don't know how much you're going to know about snow in some parts of Arizona, but hey, the desert life and different things like that. I mean, kids, they change what they're interested in every day. So
Mhm.
it just I think that the biggest thing for these parents that are listening to this podcast and this episode is to understand that there are people that are out there that will help guide you, but you've got to be willing to meet them halfway and put some of the work in to get the process started. Then hey, they're there for you. Use them. They're at your disposal. I mean,
You'll never hear me say that you have to have a scout or that you have to use some agency. It's like, I mean, for me, I've bought and sold a home. I used a realtor. Now we could have done it ourselves, but it would have taken a lot longer.
mhm,
I would have probably screwed myself over in who knows what way.
yeah,
I trust somebody that knows this realm, and they know what's best for me, and they understand what we're looking for. That's the same thing on our side. I'm not saying you have to use us or any other service, but just make sure if you don't have people in your circle that deserve to be in your corner, like they don't, then they're not in your best interest. I mean, you can try to do this yourself, but it takes a long time when you DIY it. But
yeah.
there's value in a realtor, and there's value in having a scout. There's value in having somebody in your corner that knows what they're talking about and is going to, heck, I think the amount of money I probably saved my parents, it probably pays for myself 20, 30, 40 fold
Yeah.
in making sure the kids are going to the right camps and staying away from Under Armour All Americans and all soft, yeah, all those extra things out there. So yeah, I think having somebody in your corner that has your kid's best interest in mind is never, you can't go wrong in that aspect.
Yeah. And it goes back to where we were talking about in the very beginning. Don't try to navigate through the process by mirroring someone else's experience and trying to
Mhm.
go through it the same way they're doing. You're leading yourself down the wrong path because you have a different personality, you have a different makeup, there's a whole bunch of stuff that is different about you from your best friend or your twin sister or whatever the case may be. So I do appreciate you joining me, Mandy. It's been great. How can we find you on the socials, and how can we get in touch with NSR to start this process with you?
Awesome. So on the website will be www.nsr-inc.com. That's to the home page. For me, I'm going to be found on Twitter at Mandi Balduf NSR. Same thing for Facebook, and I am on Instagram. So that's where you could find me. Tyler, I can give you my email and my cell phone. I will take calls anytime.
Okay. Awesome. Mandy, it's been great. There's a ton of information in here to unpack. I appreciate what you do, whether it's talking to these parents or just giving guidance or jumping on a podcast like this and giving them information that they may not have or may not have access to or may not know where to find it. You coming on here, joining me for this, and it's shedding some light in some areas for these players and parents, man. Cannot thank you enough. It's been a pleasure.
Oh, praise right back at you. I love talking recruiting, and I love helping families out. So anytime.
We're going to do this again at some point because I do want to get into some of the hot topics when it comes to sort of the do's and the don'ts. And I'm going to ask specific questions. I'm going to put a poll out there and just say, hey, what is your number one question when it comes to recruiting? And I want to find out their ages, like a 12, 13-year-old, maybe a 15, 16-year-old, and then maybe a 17, 8-year-old that's on the back end of their high school career. And hey, now I actually do want to play college. I want to play ball in college. What can I do? So I'm going to figure out some way to get this out there. We can ask some questions, and I'm just going to shoot them right to you, and I'm going to get your perspective on it, and I'll just host you as you take care of those questions for me.
Love it. I would love to do that. That'd be awesome.
All right. Thank you.